Welcome to Bonnie's Beat. I'm your host, Bonnie Squires. We're coming to you from Radnor Studio 21 in beautiful downtown Wayne. Although the day we're taping, it's pouring out. It's not so beautiful. We like to introduce you to people who are movers and shakers in academia, the charity world, sports, cultural organizations. And I'm very excited because we have a special guest today. He happens to be an old schoolmate of mine from Lower Merion High School. His name is Arthur Spector, Esquire. And Arthur is the chairman of the board of the Rosenbach Museum. And I just found out my whole life I've been saying it wrong, Arthur. I've been saying Rosenbach. And everybody I know says Rosenbach. So thank you for correcting me. Rosenbach, that's the way.
Yeah.
Did you ever meet any of the Rosenbachs?
I didn't. You know, when I first lived on the block in the 60s, I used to wander in. But
oh, you lived at 20th and Delancey?
I did. I lived at 2032. So the Rosenbach was a much more private kind of place then, you know, when you used to wander in. But now we welcome everybody.
Well, the reason that Arthur's on the show today is because I happen to, you know, I'm a dinosaur. I have to read newspapers. And there were two major articles in the Philadelphia Inquirer in the past couple of weeks about the Free Library and the Rosenbach working on a merger deal. Now, Arthur, you're an attorney, but I don't think you were working out the details of the deal, were you?
Not I. No.
How long have you been the chairman of the board?
I've been the chairman for about 2 or 3 years and on the board for several years before that.
How'd you get to be on the board? You said I lived down the street when I was a kid and I wandered in?
Well, no, but I've always loved books. And, you know, my wife is on the library committee of the Art Museum and has always been active at the Free Library. So library-type institutions have always been sort of part of our life.
When I bumped into you and Miriam at the reception at the Philadelphia Museum of Art for the fabulous Outsider Art exhibit, you know, I was so busy taking pictures and catching names that I didn't have time to ask you, what are you doing here? What's your interest here? Now I know. It was Miriam that brought you.
She always does bring me.
Now, I haven't been to the Rosenbach in many years, but when I was a vice president of American Friends of Hebrew University, the junior women's division, so you know it was a while ago, that was one of the places that I arranged for the group of women to go to visit the Rosenbach. And I was enthralled because I have a whole collection of Dickens books that were printed by his original publisher and literally hundreds of figurines and plates that illustrate Dickens novels. I always thought that I wanted to donate it to the Rosenbach. Now that I know who's the chairman of the board, the Rosenbach. Now that I know who's the chairman of the board of the Rosenbach, we'll talk at some future time and see about, you know, but the only thing is I don't have money to support it. I can just give you everything that's worth a lot of money. That's okay?
Yeah, it's okay.
Oh, that's okay. Okay, all right. Anyway, but I just remember that they had a large collection of Dickensiana.
They do, including 2 manuscripts, a lot of Nicholas Nickleby, for example. So, you know, the Rosenbach has about 30,000 books,
30,000.
but it has over 300,000 manuscripts.
Oh,
and that's
300,000.
It's an incredible collection.
Have they been cataloged yet?
They've been cataloged. They're cataloged in different formats, but everything basically has been cataloged.
Well,
but it's got to be recatalogued, right? In today's world, it's got to be digitally cataloged.
Right, because I figured everything's on 3x5 cards.
No, some's digital, but yeah.
Well, but the Rosenbach Museum was founded in what year?
Well, the Rosenbach Museum was founded under a deed of trust that was drafted in 1953, and which came into effect when the Rosenbach brothers died sometime after that.
But they had lived there. The museum
they lived there. They lived.
Was their house.
Was their house, and the house is still there. And then we bought the building next to it, and that's been converted inside and out to a first-class, high-security, fire-protected storage facility for all of the manuscripts.
Tell me how the idea for the merger with the Free Library of Philadelphia came about? Whose idea? Was it your brilliant idea?
I think I would take some credit for it, Bonnie.
Well, don't be overly modest.
No, it's...
Be honest.
Well, you know, let me tell you a little bit about what I think the
But you have to understand, Arthur and I went all through Lower Merion High School together. I have known him my entire life, so I can call him on things that nobody else would dare call him on. Okay, go ahead, Arthur. Proceed.
Well, look, it's like anything else, I think, Bonnie. Whether it's business, whether it's marriage, whether it's friendship, if I would ask you to go through all of those things and really ask yourself, what is the defining important part of all of those things, it would be a good partner. I mean, isn't that what all those things are really about in terms of who you're going to work with, who you're going to spend your life with, who you're going to do things with? And I think that's always what my idea was about the Rosenbach and the Free Library. Everything that the library seemed to be doing seemed to be exactly the kind of things we're doing. Both were devoted to life of the mind programs, educational programs. The collections fit. And you know, collections, now going back to things and off of the merger for a minute, things are interesting, but you have to admit, if all you would do is come into the Rosenbach and look at stuff in a case of modest interest, what really is important is using those collections to run programs, whether they're programs for kids, and we have a wonderful educational program at the Rosenbach, whether it's the reading groups who get to not only read Ulysses, but look at and work with the original Ulysses manuscript.
That's the one novel I couldn't understand a word of.
Well, come to the reading group.
For my English.
Oh no, Bonnie, you have to. You have to come.
For my master's exam, but I read like a 400-page explication of it. That I understood, but I couldn't understand a word of what James Joyce wrote for Ulysses. That was the weirdest book. Dickens, I've been reading since 8th grade at Ardmore Junior High School. Got hooked on him in 8th grade.
Do you know, Bonnie, I just went back and read Dickens for the first time since I was a kid and loved it. I mean, just a year ago, decided it's time to reread Dickens in a new light.
What did you read?
I read Oliver Twist again.
Tale of Two Cities.
I read Tale of Two Cities. I loved Tale of Two Cities.
Tale of Two Cities has always been my favorite Dickens novel.
Yeah. Oliver Twist sort of struck me as, you know, the serial kind of thing that you go to see when we were kids, and you'd go on Saturday afternoon and see the movie and see the serial, and something would happen at the end of the thing. And
yeah, the guy would drown, but then the next week they'd show you 2 minutes before he drowned, he actually exited.
And that's sort of Oliver Twist because that's how it was published and that's how it was written. But yeah, I loved it. It was great.
Dickens, what a genius. There are very few. Dickens, Shakespeare, and Emily Dickinson.
Now Shakespeare, in terms of going back to the library and the Rosenbach, we own at the Rosenbach the 2nd, 3rd, and 4th folios, you know, which are really important books, and also own so much other Shakespeare material, because part of the collection's emphasis is English literature, Americana, Judaica, and guess what the library owns? Guess what we were missing? The first folio.
And the Free Library.
And the Free Library doesn't own much Shakespeare, but it does own the first folio. And it's such a wonderful thing in Philadelphia, truly. I mean, you can't imagine what it really is like in terms of research to have all 4 folios in one place and scholars to be able to come and see them. It's really a great thing.
Let's talk about visitors. How many visitors does the Rosenbach have annually?
My director is going to be very upset if I have the wrong number, but you know, it's probably...
The newspaper had it.
15,000, is that?
It was not a very impressive number, let's put it that way. But the Free Library had, you know, like a gazillion people visiting.
And that again is part of what this is all about. So we have, you know, all of the Maurice Sendak material. We have...
Oh, Maurice Sendak, where the wild things are. Oh, what a talent.
The wild things are. And
what a
talent. In the Night Kitchen, and Bumbelardi and his new book. I mean, the things are wonderful. And we have, Bonnie, all of the drawings, all of the early sketches, all of the notes for all of the books. Now, it's sort of sad in some ways, given how important, and I think Maurice is really an important person.
Absolutely, absolutely. Because he was not just an artist and a writer, he was a philosopher.
He was a philosopher. He absolutely was. That, I'm not sure I've ever heard anybody call him that, but that's exactly what he was.
I was thinking of this amazing interview right before he died that was taped and I saw on television last year. And I mean, the mind, he was up in the stratosphere, you know? It was just remarkable. Such an amazing talent.
He is an amazing guy. But
And you and your wife got to spend an entire day. I'm so jealous.
We
I got
did.
to spend an evening with him at the Philadelphia Jewish Film Festival a few years ago. But you spent an entire day, just the two of you.
yeah, Miriam and
Wow.
I went up to the house and sat with him in the kitchen for a day. And
Name
it was-
dropper.
it was great. So, in any case, you know, we have always one room devoted to Sendak, and then we have special exhibitions in the galleries that change, and some of those are usually devoted to Sendak. But the thought that the Sendak material that we have could be viewed not by the number of people we can accommodate or the number of people that come through the Rosenbach by chance, but think about the size of the library on the parkway next to the barns, and instead of 10,000 people coming and seeing the Sendak material, hundreds of thousands of
Yes.
people will come and see it.
Amazing.
And it's exciting. And
Is it a done deal?
no, it's not a done deal. If you read the newspaper, it's an intent to merge.
It says working on merger deal.
Working on merger.
But I
There's
figured
a-
it'd be done by now because this was dated April 17th.
There's a signed memorandum of intent.
Oh, well, that's a legal document, right?
It is a legal document, and we try to get a lot of the issues hammered out in that document before we made the announcement to make sure that we were all on the same page.
How many people from the Rosenbach were involved in the negotiations and how many people from the Free Library?
The Free Library had a really interesting process. They actually named a special task force from the foundation board. Now, you know, just when we say the Free Library, this transaction is with the Free Library of Philadelphia Foundation, not the city institution, but foundation, which is the part of the Free Library that owns almost all of the rare books, that runs most of the programming that matches with the Rosenbach, and that's with whom we're doing the transaction.
We want to assure people that the location of the Rosenbach will not change. It will remain on Delancey Street, and the title will be the Rosenbach at the Free Library Foundation.
At the Free Library of Philadelphia.
I thought it said. I think it said the Free Library.
I got a press release this morning. I'll have to make sure.
I think. Well,
I
somewhere I
always
read
forget
it was
whether
the.
it's at or of, but
the Free Library
The
Foundation.
nice thing is that everybody always, you know, our name was actually.
It will be renamed the Rosenbach of the Free Library of Philadelphia Foundation.
There you
Now, if
go.
it's in the Inquirer, it must be true.
It must be. Well, and it was probably on the internet, which makes it doubly true, right? Doubly true.
Oh, well, Peter Dobrin is pretty, the culture writer, he's pretty responsive.
Yeah, Peter is.
Oh, let's give people the website for the Rosenbach right now. It's www.rosenbach.org. That's ROSENBACH.org. Even though it's spelled Bach, it's pronounced back. Okay.
So where were we? Oh, the library, Sendak. I'll let you ask another question.
Okay, well, finances must have entered into at some point along the discussion, and I know that every cultural arts organization, because a lot of my clients are cultural arts people, they're all struggling with the economy. The economy's improving. I think Obama's doing all the right things, although his hands are tied because of some opposition, shall we say.
You're not segueing into a different interview here,
No,
are you?
no,
Just-
no.
Okay.
But they're all having trouble because there are a lot of foundations that have stopped contributing, that have closed their doors, gone out of business. There are a lot of corporations that have foundations that are cutting back significantly because their business is suffering. So that must have been part of the thinking that you could leverage the Rosenbach better if it's attached to the Free Library Foundation.
Yeah, I think that's exactly right. Let me add to the foundation issue, the governmental issue. So there's little, if any, in the way of federal government funding for organizations like this anymore. There's little or
Which
no.
is tragic, I
It
think.
is tragic. There's little or no state money, and the city.
Oh, state? Harrisburg, the condition it's in these days?
The city gives us some money for facilities, but they're limited in what they can do. So no matter what you do, the fact is sources of income have significantly decreased. And so you're beholden each year, I'm not sure that's the right word, but you have to go out each year primarily to well-to-do individuals.
And there are only so many people with the last name of Lenfest. The Annenbergs are gone, although their legacy remains. But their daughter now has the foundation out in California, and they have different interests out there. And there are very few major philanthropists left in the Philadelphia area. And some of them who were major went broke. So
well, but I can't mention those names
No,
without
don't
mentioning without mentioning the Haas family, who has been
the
extraordinarily
late
generous
John Haas and
to
yes.
to the Rosenbach, and the Wincote Foundation and the Haas family did endow the director's position at the Rosenbach, and so Derek Dreher's position is the John Haas director at the Rosenbach, and it's.
And we should mention that Derek Dreher is the son of Fred Dreher and Janet Hess, who were also classmates of ours at Lower Merion High School.
That's true.
Lower Merion rules!
So I think it's hard. At the Rosenbach, we have a credit line that we don't use. We have no mortgage on the building. So we own all of that real estate. No, we own all that real estate free and clear, and we operate on a break-even budget. But it's a tight budget. And not only is it a tight budget, it's one that, as we just said, is supported each year by having to go out to high net worth individuals year after year, and they tend to become the same people and ask them again and again for support. In addition, a lot of those people want to provide endowment support, not support for current operations, and that also makes it a difficult kind of thing. So it seemed to us the Rosenbach collection and the Rosenbach programs deserved more than to run on a modest break-even budget. They deserve.
It's really a world-class collection.
Oh yeah, it's
Absolutely, and it's invaluable. There's no way you could place a value on the holdings.
None.
I don't. I assume you've got all kinds of insurance and fireproofing and
Well, the
all the
security is
safeguards.
fantastic. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. How many employees are there that work full-time at the Rosenbach?
Well, there are a number of curators. There's a full-time librarian, but I'll show you a place where we had to cut back. Other than Derek, who spends a piece of his time doing development work, we can only really support one development person. And that's just not enough, because if you're going to do fundraising and you're going to do events, you need more than one person.
What is the annual budget for the Rosenbach? You're allowed to divulge that?
Yeah, it's in our 990. You can see our financial statements. So you'd see that the budget is about $1.3 million or $1.4 million.
That's it? That's the whole budget?
We run the whole
for that
thing.
fabulous collection?
We run the whole thing on that, which is, I think your reaction is exactly the right one. We managed to do it, but it's not fair.
You must collect coupons at the supermarket when you have an opening reception.
We are cheap, Bunny. Thrifty.
Really, that's amazing
Yeah.
that you do it on that. I don't know what the free library's budget is, but it's got to be a lot more than $1 million something.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah. And they have a much larger reach when it comes to benefactors.
And they have a large development staff. You know, if you were a risk taker, you could say at the Rosenbach, Arthur, why don't you add 3 people to the staff and pay them and then go out and raise money? Well, because I don't think it is responsible to add those people, have that expense, because what happens if you're not successful?
Yeah.
It's not, you take risks in business that you don't take at organizations like the Rosenbach.
Well, let's talk a little bit about your background. After Laura Murray, you went to our mutual alma mater, University of Pennsylvania.
I did. I had dinner with somebody, Bonnie, who told me he was retiring, and he had looked back on his career and he had 30 jobs. And I was appalled. I mean, the thought that one would have 30 jobs in their lifetime was just staggering. And so as I sat there quietly at the dinner table, counting on my fingers
How many jobs you
how many
had?
jobs I had, when I began to approach that number, I thought I would just leave well enough alone. But I did practice. I taught law school. I was the.
You went to Penn Law School.
Went to Penn Law School. I was the law clerk for the Chief Justice of the California Supreme Court.
The California?
California.
California, like West Coast California?
Yeah, West Coast.
How'd you do that?
By plane.
No. I mean, what made you pick California?
Well, at that time, Roger Traynor was really one of the leading lights of the legal world. You wanted to clerk in the best of all worlds for a Supreme Court justice. And if you weren't clerking for a Supreme Court justice, there were a handful of appeals court justices and Roger Traynor. And so out to California, I went to work with him. I taught law school at Rutgers for a few years. I worked for the government in the Treasury Department, and finally came back and founded a law firm, which today still carries my name in Philadelphia, Spector, Gatton, and Rosen, although I haven't been there for 25 years.
But you're still the name on the door.
Yeah.
I love it. I love
Creepy
it.
in some ways,
You're
So-
still friendly with them, I assume.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
And then you were with Pete Musser and
And I
Safeguard
was with Pete at
Scientifics. You were
Safeguard
one of his genius
Scientifics.
young guys, right?
Yeah, we had the yes was to the with, not the genius. So, yeah, I was with Pete for a while, and it was he's such a wonderful person. I mean, it was just a great time.
When he had it, he gave it away like crazy.
He did. He was a great, and is, I shouldn't say was, he is a great, great person.
Yeah.
In any case, I then became a managing director of TL Ventures, which is Philadelphia's largest venture capital firm, and then founded my own private equity firm, Safeguard International. Pete gave us $25 million to start. And we said
25 million?
Yeah, wasn't it? Yeah, and then
What a nice round number.
it is a nice number. And then we said to Pete, and we're going to call it Safeguard International. And Pete said, no. You can have the 25 million. You can't have the name. The name is mine. So it took a long time to convince Pete, but he finally let us do it. And we ran that fund for about 15 years.
What was it worth when you finished with it?
Everybody made a lot of money, Bunny, but
Oh,
it's a
okay.
private fund, and
Oh, you can't do
I
okay.
can't divulge
Was did it end before 2008 when the bottom fell out of the economy?
Well, I would say we sold most of our holdings before that. So even though the fund went past that, the major assets were sold.
Would you show me the crystal ball you have in your pocket, Arthur? Because everything you touch seems to turn to gold. What can I say?
Well, sometimes you have to be a little lucky too, Bonnie.
Yeah, but it helps to be smart and do research. Obviously, you do a lot of research.
I was the research editor on the Penn Law Review, and
Oh.
ever since then, it has been something. Miriam and I have a large library at home on the second floor. We tore out some walls and built for ourselves a large library. It's not just the Free Library, where Miriam ran the Pepper Council for years, or the Art Museum Library Committee where she serves, or the Rosenbach, or now my involvement with the Free Library. We built a large library for ourselves, and it's just a central part of the house. It's where you go in the evening and sit. Yeah, it's great.
Who's your favorite author?
I'll tell you something. I did an interview 10 years ago, and somebody asked me that question. And although I think they asked what my favorite book was, and I told them it was The Hardy Boys. And they were appalled. I mean, the interviewers sat there and thought, that's the most terrible, terrible answer. And I reminded them that, at that age, it was wonderful because it did things that books should do. It made you imagine a different world. It made you think in different ways about different places and different things. And to me, I'll never forget the impact that that book had then. And if you ask me what inspired a love for reading, at that time, or for a lifetime, it was those early flights of imagination that came from those children's books.
I found them in Jack London's dog books.
Oh, I love the dog books.
And
White Fang.
I was always a cat
Yeah.
person. But his Jack London's, because the dogs had human characteristics, except they were nicer than humans, more honest than humans, more reliable than humans, more loyal than humans.
But if I had to pick any one person, I think Barbara Tuchman is.
History, okay.
Yeah, I thought her things are just wonderful.
I've worshipped Dickens since 8th grade when they forced me to read Tale of Two Cities, and that was it. And Sidney Carton was always one of my major heroes. It is a far, far better thing I do than I have ever done. It is a far, far better world I go to than I have ever known. Oh, how could you not love Sidney?
I think, Bonnie, that I'm not remembering incorrectly when I tell you that when I read it a year ago for the second time, I cried at the end. As he goes off to his death, it's just
sacrificing his life for the woman he loves.
Yeah, it's an incredible.
They don't do that too much these days. Not that I could think of. Anyway, what kind of big celebration are you going to have when the deal goes through, the merger of the Rosenbach with the Free Library
Well,
Foundation?
even before that, I have to put in a plug for our annual gala, the Rosenbach, which this year is on June 14. Frank Delaney, who is one of the great Ulysses scholars and a regular NPR speaker and lecturer.
I know that name, yes, I know that name.
He's a wonderful speaker. Is going to come back again this year and speak at the dinner, but it's not like a speech. It's a wonderful storytelling time. It's a great evening.
I remember going to Bloomsday on Delancey
So
Street.
2 days later, because it's always on the 16th, 2 days later, Bloomsday, this year on a Sunday. So I would tell you something else. This year, it's not only the 16th, it happens to be on Father's Day. So it would be a great thing if fathers brought their sons or parents brought their children, no matter what gender. It just is a nice way, I think, to spend the day with all of those people on the block, listening to reading, listening to the music. It's not just reading. The musical interludes are wonderful. Yeah. So the 14th for the Rosenbach.
And you always have VIPs reading.
We
I
do.
remember
We do.
the
So will
police-
you come and read?
I'd love to. The police commissioner, you'll explain to me what it means, and then I'll read it. I remember when Timony was the police commissioner, he loved Bloomsday and would go and read there. Yeah, you get a lot of Irish folk that come and like.
Well,
to
the
read.
ambassador came 2 years ago.
Ooh.
The ambassador from Ireland to the United States came, and he was at the Rosenbach now, and he stayed through the next day, read. I think his wife read as well.
Maybe you could get President Obama, because sometimes he spells it with an apostrophe.
That's right.
When he went to Ireland, he made a joke and he spelled it with an apostrophe. Well, I'm glad that you're going to be in charge of the transition, and I expect great things from the merger of the Rosenbach Museum with the Free Library Foundation of Philadelphia.
Great.
And our guest today has been Arthur Spector, Esquire, Chairman of the Board of the Rosenbach Foundation. Rosenbach, I have to force my tongue to say that. And thank you so much, Arthur. It's been a joy.
Well, thanks, Bonnie. It's fun to do this again with you. Thanks.